Welcome to this bonus edition of A Strange New Pod. I am your captain and host, Julian Brown, alongside what is quickly becoming the Starfleet Book Club aboard the USS ASNP, Lieutenant Hawk, Ensign Aaron joining us tonight as well. And then, of course, our very special guest. He is the author of many a Star Trek novel, but we're here to talk to him about his latest, Star Trek Picard Rogue Element, which is right here in my hand as I move around all of my papers.
One of
those. The New York Times best-selling author, John Jackson Miller. Welcome to the show.
Not a self-portrait. I know people have had that
That's
idea.
not you?
But
That's not you?
Actually not. No.
Aw. I mean,
No.
the resemblance is uncanny.
No, I don't even rate. It's not even close.
You don't have a bunch of holograms based after yourself?
No, not a one.
Okay.
Many accents.
No, it's not a single one.
Well, I mean, it's probably a good thing, right? Listen, Rios is a little bit unhinged, to say the least. No, you disagree? He's not unhinged, but
he's dealing with an unusual situation as someone might when one has all the technological abilities that they have then. You could who among us during particularly the last 16 months hasn't wanted to make a variety of people go away for a while and replace them with pliable people that you can make vanish by snapping your fingers. So no, it's
amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the fun thing with the book was getting to actually figure out why, because these things are just sort of presented to us in the show, and we give people the origin of the holograms. We give people the origin of him getting the ship, the La Serena.
Oh, you have it.
Oh, that's cool.
There we go. Yeah, it's not the big one, it's the medium size or small one, but yes. That comes from Eagle Moss, and they also did the book, which thankfully they sent me a copy of early just so I could make sure that nothing conflicted with what I had for the layout of the thing. But that's a whole other discussion. We spend 90% of the book on this ship, and so it's when we're on any ships, we're on that ship. So I kind of needed to know where stuff was.
Yeah,
I really like that too, because I felt like in the show Picard, the ship is so dark that you don't really get, at least for me, I didn't get a good idea of what it looked and felt like, and I thought the book did a good job of that. Like you could really sort of visualize it.
The designer of the sets did a video walkthrough, and it's on YouTube. I think it's also on the DVD, and so I actually was freeze framing where he actually had the shots of the blueprints that he had, and printed those out married the various decks up and figured out where the staircases went and things like that. And then for other things, those were questions that went to Kirsten Beyer, who is the co-creator of the show. Also, one of our many talented Star Trek novel authors.
Yes.
And so, things where, there just were no answers, like, where does the landing ramp come out? Where does that show up? That's something with, oh yeah, it's a starboard amidship. So okay, fine. That's all I need. And then it just then becomes a matter of what rooms are where and who's in what room and what kind of mischief can I do on this ship?
Mm-hmm.
We use this thing like an amusement park. And so I take it everybody's read it.
Yeah, we've read it. We're into it, and let's get right into it. We did read, speaking of the very end of the book, not spoilers, but in your acknowledgments that you specifically asked to write this book, write a Picard novel about Rios. And I guess what is it, about, he's a former Starfleet officer that made you say, hey, this is the guy, let's tell his story. Like, what was the process?
Yeah. Well, this wasn't, a kind of book where I approached them, because I've almost never approach a tie-in publisher with a proposal, almost always they come to you and they say, we want you to do a book. But when I was asked that, I said, I'll do one if it's among other demands. If it's Rios, and Margaret Clark, my editor, happened to say, well, that's great because that's exactly what we wanted you to do. And it is because in terms of story opportunities, you meet this guy and you realize, well, he comes with his own TV show, basically his own set, his own cast of characters, all of whom are him, but that doesn't matter because that's still good. I mean, so it's I think there are other ways you could go, and other novels that could be written about the cast in this prequel period, and some have been, and I know there's another novel coming out after mine, but I was like, okay, yeah, this gives me the most opportunities, and this is again somebody whose voice I thought would be interesting to kind of capture, and when I talked to the folks that produced the audiobook, Robert Petkoff recorded the audiobook, which I'm still listening to. It's just wonderful. And these things, the audiobooks are just blowing the doors off. They sell really good. And in no small part to the credit of the people that are producing them, and Robert and January Lavoie and the other the narrators that do these things. And I had said, I always send sort of my pronunciations, but I will also send a few ideas for how a character should be played. And I said, basically, his two gears are disinterest and disgust. So
that's a very good way to describe Rios.
I mean, he's like, I can't even. I just leave me alone. I don't even know why you're still talking to me. This is kind of where he is always. He's in that low register until he gets really upset, at which point he gets a blood pressure that's detectable, because otherwise he's just that opening scene where we see him and something in the TV show, and he's got a piece of the ship or something in his shoulder,
yeah,
and there's no explanation.
Nope.
I was like, okay, fine, this is where he's going to start every scene with me.
Well, and the fact that not only is there a chunk of metal from possibly the ship, possibly from something else in his shoulder, and then he asks, kind of like Mariner in Lower Decks, speaking of Lower Decks later on, to keep the scar. Like, don't mess with my scar. I'm keeping that thing, and I'll keep my bloody shirt too.
Well, he just wants to feel something.
Yeah.
I think this is somebody who, and again, this was going to be the challenge. Also mentioned in the acknowledgments is that when I talked to Kirsten, I said I want to do a fun book, because my previous two books, Enterprise War and Die Standing, had both been Enterprise War is military science fiction. Die Standing is a spy novel, more or less.
I thought that was fun.
It's fun, but it's all black humor. The body count in those two novels is astronomical, and particularly in being in Emperor Georgiou's head for all of Die Standing. That was like. When I wrote a book called Lost Tribe of the Sith once, and it wasn't a book that I wrote all at once. I wrote it in short stories that I would do about every 6 months or 4 months or whatever for Lucasfilm. And so even though everybody was a villain, I kind of had a break in between them. Whereas this was, Die Standing was 4 months, basically with the most sarcastic, caustic person in ever, probably to lead a Star Trek novel.
But
And
God,
again,
like, you got her voice so good. I know that's not the book we're talking about, but damn
no,
it, that
that's
was like
cool.
perfect, man.
Well, it's just having to see everything, through her lens. That's kind of exhausting. To the writer that's there all the time, and it's like she can't say that thing. That's actually too kind. That's too nice. That's that, and so going over to Rios instead. I again, because of the pandemic and everything else, I wanted to do something that would be fun, but yet it also had to deal with the fact that when we see him in the show, and probably when we see him very early, as we see him in this book, he's not Mr. Fun. He's not a very happy guy. So I had to make sure I surrounded him with people that he could not get away from interacting with, and people that would be entertaining for the readers to see, and for him to bounce off of, and some of them he wants to actually bounce off of bulkheads,
Yes.
because he just does not. He does not. He wants to be, completely left alone. But that's okay. There's a recipe for fun in there, and yet I still can have kind of the heavier moments that his character arc requires. At certain points in the book, and one big point in the book where he does come to grips with the sort of business that is what put him on his spiral.
Yeah. You can't hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh yeah, you're up.
Sorry. Oh, sorry. Anyways, one question I had to ask is the idea of simulacra and simulation. It's the most prominent theme in the novel, from the Iosians on down to the Parch actualities, and even the prominence of the holodeck as almost as multiple characters on the last arena in the story. And I had asked, why did you choose this theme in telling Rios' story?
Well, and that hits on a lot of levels as well, because one of the things that's in here is the notion of books and collecting, and fetishization of physical things, and the value of the real as opposed to the value of the virtual. There's a joke in there about Jesus Christ and the loaves and the fishes, that that I've been waiting to use for about 20 years, because it is exactly that kind of thing where people are talking about online piracy, and is an ebook the same as a real book, and what if you're able to actually use a printer to print out parts of a car or something like that? Is that really violating a patent, or is that really this or really that? What's real? What's genuine? What does it matter whether something is real or genuine or not? And of course, this is all happening in this backdrop of what we're going through as a society last year. I run a website called Comicron, which is I do I've for the last 25 years I've done sales charts for the comics industry, and far from getting killed by the shutdown, despite the fact that comics were not comic stores didn't get new comics for about 5 weeks. It actually was an explosive period of growth, and it was because we had all these people that suddenly had all this free time, free money, not free money, but in some cases free money
for some people, right?
If you weren't going on vacation, you had money to buy that thing you always wanted. And so we have, not just for comics, which had a great year and are still having a great year this year, we have a predicament where you go into Target and NBA, Major League Baseball, all these sports cards, they're not even able to put them on the shelves for the safety of our customers, because people are so much demanding those things, and at the same time, we have these non-fungible tokens going around.
Because that was the next thing I was going to say.
And which is about as ludicrous to me as I can imagine.
Oh, it's so fucking ridiculous.
But again, it gets into this discussion of, where is the value in something really? And, there's a line in this book that comes from an interaction Rios has with somebody who is not real, but the emotion that is expressed by that person is relevant, and his thought is artificial gravity is still gravity, whether it really is or not. It has the same, these things have the same pull, the same effect. But yeah, I mean, I really, on the collectible side of things, I mean, that's been a big part of my life. For, I worked for the largest collectibles magazine publisher and book publisher in the world for about 13 years, and I had a lot of time to think about, what's got value, what doesn't have value, what's a reproduction, what isn't. Ridiculous questions like, why in our price guide why did we have the counterfeit version of Cerebus the Aardvark #1, even though it was counterfeit? And it's because people still want it because it has conversational value, because it was a big deal when it happened. So anyway, again, this book goes down a lot of weird streets.
Yes.
Did that kind of inspire the whole interaction with the Duke and his library, and that, this guy who has a library of incredibly rare artifacts and that, and yet all of them are apparently
damaged in some way, shape, or form.
An original William Shakespeare manuscript with a big wine stain on it, because he leaves it out for people to mess with.
Why would you, in a lot of these cases, why would you have one of these things if not to show off to other people? And to talk about and to say that you've got it. There is we show the opposite extreme in this book, which is the people that every so often you'll hear the story about somebody who's stolen the real Mona Lisa, but he's going to keep it in a room where nobody's going to know about, and you wonder, well, what's the point of that? That's there's a bragging rights thing to this whole thing. Since this goes back to just the basic commercial question of the period and the novel anyway, and which we have to get into, which is, why does anybody need Han Solo and the Millennium Falcon in a world where there's a replicator? Why does anybody need anything to transport things when you can create matter from energy? And so, the book has to set up right there at the beginning that that's just in the Federation. That's not available to everybody. We're not in the Federation. We're in these other areas. There are things that can't be replicated, and then there are things that can't maintain their value if they are replicated. And I even have that as a literal thing happening with a particular item in the book, where if it does get replicated, it doesn't work.
Well, and that's where I immediately, throughout reading this book, was thinking, holy shit, these items that we're talking about in this book and reading about are very much almost like NFTs, and it's crazy, and that whole freaking craze. It's amazing.
Yeah, and that doesn't even exist as a concept for me until I'm well into the book, because of when it happened. But no, I mean, I really, because of the cocktail of characters that I had in this book, particularly the villain, who I have not named here for spoiler purposes, but also well, look right there at the beginning, and this is on the back cover of the book, so there's no problem getting into it. We have the Iosians, who are as you mentioned, they're play acting. They're involved in a civilization, century-long cosplay, acting as if they're on the set of The Untouchables, which they literally were on the set of The Untouchables in a piece of the action, which came out, which aired the day I was born, which is very weird. That was the first episode. I was busy.
You've been a Trek fan for a long time.
Well, no, it was I wasn't able to catch that. But yeah, that was then, and I had always wanted to try to wallow in that episode at some point in some way, shape, or form, and say, well, how would that work? How could that have happened? And how would it work going forward? And knowing what we know now about, that period and all the people, that are in it. That's what is that really like? And how is it that what we saw on screen is a somewhat sanitized version of what that life was like, and so yeah, I mean, and that is a yet another dynamic. We have people who are willing to cosplay, or rather reenact, Civil War battles, but they won't bury the dead. We have people who love having dressing up for medieval Ren fairs, but they're never digging a latrine. They only want the trick or treat part of it. They don't want the whole experience, the whole immersion. And if they do, they generally need professional help, because you really don't want to have lived through some of those things, and some of those things were not fun. Well, that's what's going on with the Iosians on this much larger scale. That's our whole world.
Well, I really liked, I have another question, but I wanted to just say that I really liked when you see Ledger and there's this other book, and when she's okay, she's been called multiple times on how insane her lifestyle is and their whole thing, and she's never bothered by it. But when she sees that there's this whole other world of like drugs and prostitution, and that she and her mother and other women her life would be very different, that's what causes her and I think that there's a lot of real life connection with that, where most people are not bothered by something until they see how it could impact them, and they go, oh my god, this is crazy, when it was always crazy, but they didn't have that connection. So I thought that was an interesting moment.
Well, Ledger is one of my favorite characters I've created, and a very strong person, and overly strong in some moments, in terms of just being. I saw her as you get Katharine Hepburn, Rosalind Russell, these women in the early 1930s, where they're just firecracker bulldog characters who can stand up to anybody who they're in the room with and bowl them over. But yeah, I mean, we have to assume that at some point everybody in their society realizes somebody's got to rent Goodfellas at some point. Somebody they must see those things, but I don't think it actually hits home until you actually deliver it in the format in which they were to have gotten the rest of the information in the beginning. And I read about Lucky Luciano, who's one of the first people named in the book. He's quoted at the beginning, and the woman who was basically his partner / mole / whatever the term is, and it's just there are 2, 3, 4 chapters of just things that will make your jaw drop, in terms of the victimizations that were constantly going on, and yet start idolizing these characters and these people, long before The Godfather, long before the Untouchables. We're going back to Top of the World Ma. We're talking about the 1940s films.
Public Enemy.
I mean, Scarface, the first time, and so it's always been a thing where it's been something where people will if not idolize those people in that sort of life. It's definitely it's the same thing happens with the Old West. The same thing, and the South. People have gotten their historical archetypes from this part of society or that part of society, and they don't bring along all the baggage. We get into some of the baggage, I guess.
Yeah.
They love the pinstripe suits and that, but they don't like how they can afford them.
And so I do love this visual of they're willing to make their own version of a flivver of a car from the 1920s, and then transport it millions of miles across the galaxy, just to drive over every pothole with Rios in the trunk.
And cigars that they don't actually smoke.
Oh,
But listen, as I think that a lot of what you do with this book, with all of that, makes a lot of sense to nerds like us, because we go to the conventions, we wear the outfits, we collect the stuff. I can see that you collect the stuff in your background, and I think that's honestly, it's really smart to do with the novel, because it's something we can all relate to. It's like, oh yeah, I do have a lot of shit.
And if there's one thing that I wish, it was that I wish that the Star Trek logo or the Star Wars logo or some whatever the franchise logo is it helps sell books, but it can be a barrier to people who don't read Star Trek or haven't seen Picard or whatever. The one question that blew my mind at Kansas City last week was that doesn't look like Jean-Luc Picard. And I'm like, no, okay, let me explain the TV show branding concept. And of course, you never will see a tie-in novel, very rarely, go up for something like a Hugo or a Nebula or something like that, because they're considered to be successful on their own, apart from the general demands of science fiction, and science fiction publishing. But it's one of those things where there's stuff in here, I think, for a lot of non-Star Trek fans. And I actually said to somebody again at the convention the other day, this may be the Star Warsiest Star Trek novel I've ever done.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, because it is a space opera more than any of the other books. Science plays a role, but it's a relatively small role, and always in service of the plot.
What did you I just kind of going in a different direction.
Sure.
So I noticed that we had Rios as the captain now, and the last couple of novels have been, we had Picard and we had Riker, and everybody kind of got screwed by Starfleet in one way or another. Riker, his kid died, Picard, everything with the things that happened in Mars, and now Rios got screwed somehow and is now living his life. Is that something that was part of what they were going for with these novels? Is that some sort of underlying thing?
I think it's what they were going for with the show.
Yeah, Starfleet seems to not be doing the most Starfleety things.
Well, and I know that's why a number of people are not happy, because they prefer to cosplay a Starfleet that is everybody nice to each other, everybody living their best life, exploration, there, I have not really done the exploration novel because, again, partly again where I come from, comics and Star Wars and other things. I'm into a much more of a kinetic kind of a book, but also, I'm an action writer. I'm a comedy writer, and I can do deep thought. I clearly do, but I'm not going to do 350 pages of it, and not have some set pieces where things blow up, and in novel and unusual ways. But no, I think that the problem is that world is not that interesting. If everybody is perfect and beyond and everything, and I know that was what Roddenberry was looking for, but Roddenberry, is also a product of the 1960s, which was followed by a 1970s, and things change and things evolve, and societies go up and down and up and down and up and down, and if it just only ever gets better, well, that's dull. And what ends up happening is, you expect that basically, whatever. One of the things I used to say, and again, this goes back to my comics history site, Comicron. Will Eisner used to say that the comics industry had nearly died 3 times. I've said, well, we're actually up to 4 at this point now, and every time the thing that we invented to get us out of the last problem causes the next one because we overdo it. And I could get into all that, but it's a completely different podcast at this point. But yes, I mean, everything, superheroes we invented in the 1960s to get us out of the crash of the 50s. But then, when there's nothing but superheroes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, it causes a problem. There's all these different things that cause these things. And I think that's probably what's going on with Starfleet as well. Starfleet has basically been, by once you go past Next Gen and DS9 and Voyager, Starfleet has basically just been expanding the boundary of the Federation by inviting in anybody who wants to come in. Well, the problem is a lot of those people who wanted to come in, well, it's like NATO. They wanted to be protected from the neighbors. They wanted the security of Starfleet vessels coming in and around all the time. And this goes back to my my international relations graduate school work. People are when they're confronted in Una's book, the Last Best Hope, with what is coming in the Romulan supernova, and this is not just a case of a failed state. This is a case of you were told 3 months or 3 years in advance, 4 years in advance, that the state will fail, and everybody's having to go as fast as they can, and you have Federation planets that just say no. That say, nope, we're not taking anybody else. And if you want to throw us out of the Federation, that's fine. But we're only going to give you this much. And so I have kind of that coming at us from the Federation at the same time as I push back at it with a couple of non-governmental organizations that we mentioned here, which is the main one is the Silvus Project. Which is literally in the business of recycling planets, to try to create places for refugees. And as readers will see, I tie that into a very old and established plot line that we know of from Star Trek, because planets have been going wrong or blowing up for a very long time.
Which I, by the way, never ever saw coming, which is great writing on your part. Before I go to Hawk, I just had a comment here on Twitch regards to what you were saying, John, about some people not liking what the shows have been doing. We all love it, by the way. I'll remind people that since TOS, Starfleet has not always been portrayed in the best light. So people do need to remember that. This comment from Lexi is perfect, though. It's one of the most appealing facets, of Discovery and Picard, striving for better while acknowledging things aren't perfect and not pretending like they are.
Well, anybody who's read my Star Wars novels and comics, Knight Errant, the Kenobi novel, the New Dawn book, Lost Tribe of the Sith.
Lost Tribe of the Sith is wonderful, by the way.
Lost Tribe of the Sith, and then the giant book, the Knights of the Old Republic, which just came out in the 1,344 page version.
Ooh, yeah.
That is the #1 graphic novel in the comics industry in the month of July, which blows my mind.
Congrats.
Considering how expensive that was. Yeah, that news came out while I was at Kansas City last week for Planet Comic-Con. But in all those cases, they're all about a Jedi alone, a Jedi cut off from the Jedi Order. And in most cases, I take the approach that the Jedi Order, the organization, the franchise, is the problem. It's inability to see the future, its inability to change, its inability to recognize phantom menaces. These are flaws in the organization. And while Obi-Wan Kenobi can miss the brotherhood of the family and the brotherhood missed the story. They missed what was going on. They missed the threat. And so, severing from it in the case of all of my characters that are in these stories is a rational solution and the right solution for them, which is one reason why, I think the best movie of the sequels, for all of its flaws, and there are a number of them, is Episode 8. And I know people hate hearing that, because because
it's my favorite too.
Well,
Mine
because
too.
the act of in many cases, these the fans are lost as soon as Luke throws the lightsaber away. But anybody who does a fair reading of everything that has happened up until then, like Luke Skywalker must agree that when Jedi get together and form clubs, they eventually fracture and somebody goes off and does something bad. And maybe isn't it better just to say the heck with this? Well, I mean, and that is a theme running through, particularly Knights of the Old Republic, is that the Republic, the government, has been coasting on having these free police officers, these superheroes, and protecting us all this time. And darn it, it's just that every so often one of them goes crazy and destroys everything. And maybe it's not such a good deal after all. So these are obviously questions that are not just in Star Wars. I mean, it's in Marvel's superhero movies as well, and The Watchmen, and all these other things. Isn't it better just to take care of ourselves as opposed to look to these other folks? But here, in a sense, in Star Trek, in this period, it's the people that have let down the ideals of the Federation. The people who live there have said, okay, we're closing our doors, and we're afraid of synths, so we're not going to have those anymore. And these reactionary moves to things that are there, they're big and bad, that have to be reacted to.
So to change topic, one of the things we love here is callback, and there is a lot of callback in this book.
A lot of callback.
From like a piece of the action with the Iosians to Sovok from Captain's Holiday, and of course all the other references to the Klingon Empire that we don't want to spoil. So what was the process of bringing all these different characters and people together for this book?
Well, I look to see who's available, look to see who's not dead. Although that doesn't always stop me. In fact, that does not stop me at all in this book. I think I have more dead cameos than living ones.
Quite a few.
Yeah,
Quite
we'll
a
just
few.
we'll leave it there.
Yep.
But no, I mean, I look at what will serve the story, and you know, what's going to be you know, what's gonna enrich the story and not just be gratuitous. You know, what's going to make people go, yeah, that character is who I expected to have show up. That character is and in some cases you don't even have to, you know, bring the character in. In the very beginning, when I was first offered the chance to write for Star Trek, I said I wanted to write a Moriarty book, because those were my favorite episodes of those, and all the Klingon episodes, Klingon Homeworld episodes were among my favorite episodes from Next Generation, and I love Daniel Davis, and I've got his picture over here on the wall as Moriarty, and I am just you know, I had suggested that, and I found out well they were doing a book already, which was what was it called? The Light Fantastic. That's what it was called. And I'm going to swat a fly on my screen. Just a second.
That's fair. Yeah.
Okay.
I've got one buzzing past mine too. So.
And it's now smeared on the screen. That's lovely. Okay. All right. Well, so there is a
another
body
life that you've snuffed out with all of these books,
you know,
and things. You
there
killed
might not
so
be-
many.
There might not be a body count in the book, but there is now one in this podcast.
And this pod won.
One.
Is that our first on pod death? It might.
Yes, one
it might
life
be.
form has been extinguished.
Yeah, this is a freaking flying ant.
Oh,
I am.
Suck.
Well, I live on a
Exclusive interview.
I live on a
John Jackson Miller
wildlife
kills.
lake, and so this lake that's you know, I've got every animal in the world on it. Unfortunately, that includes insects, and they're looking for the air conditioning. But where was I? Deep cut cameos was that?
Yes, deep cut cameo.
Yeah, you know, we mentioned Moriarty in passing with regard to the holographic characters. That the Moriarty protocols establish what holographic characters are allowed to know, because obviously there is a difference between the Doctor from you know, from Voyager and your standard holographic character in a holonovel, in terms of what their knowledge of the universe is, and you know, what they're able to do when they move around, and what they're able to know from one another.
Yeah. You actually, it's so funny you brought up Moriarty. That was one of my questions and one of my favorite moments of the book. I'm like, of course Starfleet would name the protocol after him, right? Because that's just what they do. There's another great moment that gave me one of my biggest chuckles reading this, and that's when Ledger actually calms down Sovek using the best book in the world, The Rules of Acquisition. That was the biggest laugh I got from the book, because I love the rules of acquisition.
Well, and you know, I had not really written Ferengi much before. I mean, there's a Ferengi in Takedown. There's a Ferengi with the magician cast that's in the Prey trilogy. But you know, in terms of you know, how they would interact with Iosians,
Right.
it seemed to me that was a fun way to go. And yeah, I think that I realized I had not actually had a rules of acquisition reference, and I said, okay, that's the perfect place for it.
It gave me quite a good chuckle. Listen, we all enjoyed the book a lot. It's great. I want to actually move away real quick from Rogue Elements and talk about a project that you're actually not working on, but you've had, you know, a hand in this Trek Litverse, right? And we have this upcoming Coda trilogy of books, and kind of wanted to get your take on this undertaking, which as we've kind of come to understand is going to kind of nuke the current Trek Litverse as it was before these kind of tie-in novels all started taking place.
That's more than I know about it. No, I don't know what they're doing. I can tell you that we went through this with Star Wars, and I think I can claim that I went through it because I was writing a novel called Rogue Elements. That was the second title I had for it. The first title was Loose Cannons. The second title, I said, if we don't use that, we can use Rogue Elements. And my publisher my editor liked both of those. But then she said, I got about 2/3 of the way through, and they said, well, Lucasfilm needs you to come out to California, you and Timothy Zahn, and we're going to do a video out there, which is what we did, about the expanded universe and how everything going forward from my novel would now be, reflecting actual canon from there forward, and that everything previous would be legends under the legend banner. And to the point, I'm so in the middle of this that I actually have a graphic image somewhere, a JPEG of the Kenobi paperback that was to have no Legends logo on it. And instead it is the first novel to have the Legends logo, and I end up having the first Legends book because it's the 8th printing of Lost Tribe of the Sith, which is actually up to its 18th printing now. Wow. Which proves that people want the physical book, because those were originally ebooks for free, and
if I can go to the bookstore and get my hands on a physical copy, I will always get a physical copy unless something is.
Yeah. The way I do it is, I used to be just the physical copy person, but because of like my life and I'm driving a lot and blah, 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 I do audiobooks most often. And I also like that sort of, it reminds me of the old, when you listen to the radio, but when I really love a book and I listen to it, then I go buy the physical copy because I'm like, okay, I need this. So for me, it's like, I straddle both of those worlds, and it's interesting the way Star Trek, they have, we've got January Lavoie. I'm not sure who narrates the male voices.
Robert Petkoff does. Robert Petkoff has done all of my novels, the Prey novels, Enterprise War, and he did Picard.
He did such a good job on this one. And January Lavoie in Die Standing does her Georgia
voice. She's amazing.
Is insane. Her Michael Burnham voice, because she did Wonderland, insane. It's remarkable. So they've made good choices there. Amazing. I love her.
Well, but to get back to that, before it was so we decided we're throwing. We knew canon was going to be a big deal, so we knew the book couldn't be loose cannons.
That would have been funny.
Brittany would have liked that.
Well, also the main character's name was Kanan, and we thought, well, maybe since it's coming out before the TV show, people won't know how to pronounce his name. Although there is still a loose cannon joke in the book. But the Rogue Elements thing, again, I said, okay, I'll just use that later, because we changed the name of the book to A New Dawn, which was supposed to reflect that it was the beginning of this new era of continuity. Even though the planet that they're on in the book, if the sun ever rises over the civilized part of the planet, everybody dies.
I love that book, though.
It's a fun book. It's just but what was going on there? Why did they do that? Why did they need to do that? They needed to do that simply because they could not give J.J. Abrams a multi-billion-dollar movie where the opening crawl is going to have to say Han and Leia have 3 children, 2 of them are dead, and 1 of them killed the other.
It's true.
They just couldn't do it, and I'm sorry, we just couldn't do a Picard show where you have to go and say, by the way, here's all the kids that have been born when you didn't know about it.
Right.
There are kids, but I'll tell you one thing: people who write TV shows kind of like to write their own characters, kind of like to create their own situations, kind of like to do their own things. And it's not just TV shows, but it's movies, it's everything else. Who doesn't? We understand in the tie-in world that The novels are read in the thousands and in the tens of thousands. Sometimes if you're very lucky, the hundreds of thousands. But the TV shows are seen in the millions and tens and millions, and movies, the hundreds of millions of people. And if something is going to be, the leading thing that is going to be the pool of knowledge that everybody is drawing from, you kind of want it to be the most viewed thing, the most popular thing, the most aware thing. Now, I'll say, even given all of that, Star Trek was in a better position than Star Wars and some other franchises because it has time travel. It already had alternate universes. It's all there. So it was very easy to go to, unlike Star Wars, which has no time travel.
Right.
But their approach to it, I think is probably, I really think that, I think Marvel and the MCU has finally, I think, gotten people to understand, okay, you know what, we're going to let every story have happened. Every story has, and particularly as we get into the multiverse, phase of things, no pun intended. We were already accustomed to James Bond's appearance changing over and over again, and we did not need regeneration to do that. It was cool that we had regeneration in Doctor Who that allowed all these stories to work together. But, as I've said before, the Aston Martin is in Skyfall. That character did something having to do with that car, and maybe it was Goldfinger and maybe it wasn't. And maybe it was Daniel Craig and maybe it wasn't. But that's kind of, we're all, unless you're going to say, this is the beginning, middle, and end of the series, and nothing ever will expand upon it ever. And there are, shows like that. But heck, even Calvin and Hobbes are appearing in other comic strips now. So
one thing, it's funny you mentioned regeneration and that. You know why they started that, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, they want to keep the show going for one thing, but I expect you have another answer.
William Hartnell wanted more money.
Oh, well, it
always comes down to more money. Yeah.
Tale as old as time.
John, I know that we're here to talk about a Star Trek book, but I do want to say, before I let you kind of talk about any other upcoming projects that you may have coming up, that the Legends books, as they are now called, which I still kind of refuse to call them, hold a very special place in my heart. I've read, I think, almost all of them, including your books. So it'll always be the expanded universe to me. So I did want to say that.
Well, they're all still on our shelves. We're all still drawing things from them. Legends may be true in part, in whole, or not at all. And it's particularly as we get further down the road from the sequels, it gets a lot easier for them to bring in characters and concepts and either reimagine them, as in the case of Thrawn.
Yes.
Or do nothing to them to change them in their appearance or whatever, as in the case of I had the Mosep Benid character from Kenobi who appears in Canto Bight.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same exact character. Nothing has changed. And if you want to feel like what happened before happened, that's fine. Note that the Picard novel has quite a few callbacks to my pre-Coda books.
Yep.
And I don't care. I honestly don't care. I mean, I'm not going to write a sequel to, Takedown or Prey or whatever if they tell me I'm not going to.
Right.
But as far as I'm concerned, some version of some character who is similar to the character that I wrote about, or this character that I wrote about, or whatever. I mean, the callbacks. Well, I mean, without spoiling anything on a new book, we go back to Enterprise War and the Lurian named Baladon. Well, the Baladonians are one of the factions in the very first book I did for Star Trek, which was an ebook called Absent Enemies. And unless you were actually paying attention, you probably never, from having read one to the other, you might not have made that connection. But you realize how closely those two stories interlock. Once you go back and reread it, and you realize, oh, well, not only did Spock know the original Baladon, but Spock told them to go to the planet that they're fighting over, years after that character's death.
Yeah. John, this has been absolutely wonderful. Before we let you go, we'd love to ask you any upcoming projects you can share with us that you won't get sniped in the head from non-disclosure agreements. As Una McCormick so gracefully put it one time.
He dies on screen.
Yeah.
No. There's already been an ant die on screen over here. So no, what I've got, the stuff that has come out recently is obviously as the Picard book, as mentioned, the Star Wars Old Republic omnibus. Get it while you can, because those are just going to get more valuable, I'm pretty sure. And I do have, you can get signed copies of both on my website. Although I probably need to put a link to people actually getting it at some point somewhere. Because I don't really have a shop page anymore. Then also out from Star Wars, my Lost Tribe of the Sith comic series.
Oh, nice.
Which was a sequel to it, the sequel to the prose books called Spiral. That is out in Star Wars Epic Collection Volume 4 from Marvel. That just came out, I think, in June or I think it was in June. From Titan. Titan is doing all of the short stories that we did in its magazines in these hardcover books. So the first volume is already out. I'm in that one. The second volume comes out in September. And I have the lead story in that, and that is my Kenobi prequel that I wrote for Insider back when that novel came out. And they're doing more of those. They're doing one for Star Trek Explorer magazine for the short stories that they ran in 2000 to 2003, I think it was. So those are all things that are either out or are coming out, and I just can't say what I'm working on.
That's fair.
Are you coming to any other conventions? I know you told us you had just gotten back from some.
Yeah. I did Raleigh and then just Planet Comic-Con. I am confirmed for Kineticon in Hartford, I guess it is, in September. Or not September, I guess this is September. Good grief, how did that happen? Then I've got a couple more stops that I'm negotiating, all on the East Coast, Central U.S. It's just it's always a big haul to try to go to the West Coast, unfortunately.
That's all right.
And I literally decided that I was going to Planet Comic-Con at the last minute instead of going to Star Trek Las Vegas, just because one of the things right now, I really don't want to kind of get too far into where I am negotiating to go to right now, because I have no idea what's really going to come out or what's really going to happen.
Right.
It's we everything was so up and down. I will say for Star Trek fans specifically, and I know they're definitely having it this time because we've missed it 2 years in a row. My friend David Mack, who is writing Coda,
yes,
is a guest of honor at my hometown show in Memphis. That's Mid-South Con. That's going to be in late March 2022. This time for sure, because we couldn't have it in 2020 or 2021. And I've been to, gosh, the first one of those I went to was in 1985, I think. Wow. I think I was in high school. And I've gone to something like 18, 19, 20 of them, something like that. So I will be definitely going to that.
Awesome. Well, you already mentioned your website. Before we let you go, where can people find you on?
Yeah, farawaypress.com. And in fact, yeah, farawaypress.com/events/signed hyphen copies / that's the signed copies page, but I need to put a link on the front page. And I do have Picard in stock at the moment. My Facebook is John Jackson Miller. My Instagram is John Jackson Miller. My Twitter is JJM Faraway. Over on my comics history site, Comicron, COMICHRON.com. I have a Twitter for that by that name, also a Facebook page, and Patreon.
Awesome. Well, that is so cool. Rogue Elements, ladies and gentlemen. Why don't you hold up your copy? I'll hold up my copy.
We're
Is
giving it
available
away.
now at your, there it is. At
See
your
that
favorite
resemblance
bookstore.
right there?
It is a great resemblance.
Yeah, not really.
At
But
your
okay.
favorite local bookshop, et cetera, or your favorite e-reader. John Jackson Miller, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Absolutely, and may the force live long and prosper.
May the force live long and prosper.
Thanks for beaming into our podcast today. If you want to keep the hailing frequencies open, you can subscribe on Apple and Google Podcasts, YouTube, and Spotify. Like what you hear? Put in a good word with Starfleet and leave us a 5-star review.